Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being the 24th day of July 2017. I trust that everyone had a wonderful weekend. For those of you whose lives may have been temporarily disrupted as a result of unfolding events in your neighborhoods, I trust that things have settled down now. Speaking about the South Church Street, Windsor Park, South Sound area in relation to the smoke and fire at one of the terminals on Sunday as well. So I trust everyone had a great weekend. We have a full studio this morning, and I will be introducing my guests soon. I want to say that I was brought up in a Christian family, and Myrtle Connor, who was my mother, made sure that I went to Sabbath school every Saturday and Sunday school on Sunday, made sure I didn't get into any trouble, so kept me occupied on the weekend. But even with all of that, on Saturday evening, I partied with the devil. And even though I was brought up in a Christian family home, I partied with the devil. And the devil, Mr. Ivan Farrington, who turned 83 last week, they had a surprise party for him in West Bay. It was supposed to be a surprise party. He was told that there was a party for the Deputy Governor, Mr. Franz Manderson. So he ended up bringing a gift for him, and he was walking around with the gift in his hand, only to find out that the party was for him. But had a good crowd down there, had some nice fish tea, a lot of food. I had 2 servings of conch soup as well, so had a great time. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I'm your host, Orit Connor. My 2 co-hosts in the studio with me this morning, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McFeel. We also have in the studio with us this morning, Ms. Deborah Webb-Sibley's, Ms. Annie Moulton, who knew me from way, way back, probably before, from the time that I was born. And we have with us Ms. Linda Mitchell as well now. The 3 of these ladies play very important roles in the Cayman Islands, either in government or in civil society as well. We're going to be discussing the Older Persons Law, which comes into effect came into effect last week, Monday, as well. So, speaking about older persons, we also have a co-host in the studio here who is very young, a few years younger than Mr. Ivan, and Miss Annie will tell you, about her age as well. And I'm hoping to reach there one of these days myself. So there are a lot of people who are experts here, or will be experts in some of the challenges and the excitements of being an older person as well. So we're going to go around the table. First, I'm going to say very quickly, good morning and welcome back to my 2 co-hosts. And then after that, I'm going to have Miss Deborah Webb-Sibley's tell you about her responsibilities. Then we're going to ask Miss Annie Moulton, and then we're going to ask Miss Linda Mitchell. So to my two co-hosts, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. And we have a nice crowd here this morning with us.
Yes, we do. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to everyone. And from the time I saw Miss Annie, I knew it had something to do with the BPW. And can I hail up again, as I did last week, the BPW, because they were one of the organizations that kindly provided me with my initial scholarship, and I completed a partial scholarship to assist me with my first degree in political science. Yeah, but I'd also like to say good morning, welcome, and all these beautiful fine ladies, and to my two male co-hosts as well, and of course the Cayman community.
Dr. McField, morning, sir.
Good morning to you, Mr. For the Record. Good morning to my co-host, Teresa. Good morning to all your local listeners and those abroad who listen to every morning that we're on. And good morning to your guests. I saw these beautiful ladies when I walked in, and I thought that they were here for some other purpose, but now I discovered that they're here to talk about the older person's law, and that is very exciting because I haven't read it. That's one law I haven't read. I don't know, it's because I'm older, and to read it and say, well, my friend, you're there too. So maybe that's
or
why.
You could probably write it, right?
But I am here to listen to what they have to say and to help whenever I can. As we were saying, when I came in, I am glad that I'm an older person. I don't think that if I was a younger person, I would have survived in today's Cayman. Today, it would have been very brutal for me to survive today. And so I'm fortunate that I'm older and I'm still young in mind.
Okay, so we're going to start with Miss Deborah Webb-Sibley's, and I can say that she is the acting director of the Policy Coordinating Unit in the Cabinet Office, and she's also the chairperson of the, it's a committee? Or a board? You tell her audience, Miss Debbie.
I was the chairperson for the steering committee who was responsible for the development of the older persons policy, and also for the chairperson for the subcommittee, legal subcommittee that developed or advocated for the older persons law, and now the chairperson for the implementation action plan to support the full implementation for the older persons policy.
Okay, Miss Linda.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to be here with all of you.
Thank you.
I'm Linda Mitchell, the manager of the Pines Retirement Home. My purpose on the committee is to serve as a committee member, referencing Goal 3, making sure that the elderly are taken care in the Cayman Islands. And it has really, really been fun serving on that committee. Part of our responsibility was to establish goals for the policy, and now that we are almost at that point where we can let go of them, we're very, very excited about seeing everything becoming as part of the policy.
Good morning, Miss Annie, again. And
Good morning,
welcome.
OC.
Tell us all about your role. We know that you're very active, always been active in the community, one way or the other.
I try to be, OC.
Yes.
Even though I'm getting much older now and happens to be one of the oldest person on the task force for the older persons policy, which I've enjoyed very, very much. I've learned quite a bit in being there and helping out with this policy. Myself and Rosie Miles, who unfortunately could not be here this morning, we were given, I think it was goal number 1, and we had to do our research and get everything ready for the action plans for that goal, which, like I said, I've learned a lot through being on this committee and working along with Debbie, Linda, and all of the other committee members.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Debbie, I see here where the policy was actually approved by Cabinet on the 21st of October 2016. So didn't waste any time in terms of moving this forward. Was there a particular urgency, for this?
Well, we need to start back to when we first started looking at the need to develop a policy to address the welfare of older persons in the Cayman Islands. And within the Department of Children and Family Services, we started back in 2009. And it tied in with the government's strategic plan in regards to what they wanted to achieve starting back in 2012. They wanted to address the needs of older persons in the Cayman Islands. And in 2015, we were assigned or appointed by Cabinet, for those of us who served on the steering committee, to develop this policy. So a lot of groundwork was done. A lot of research continued to be done in 2015 and into 2016. So one may think it was something that happened overnight. No, it wasn't. It was the continuation of a process. But in regards to pulling the 5 goals that we identified within this policy, it took a lot of research in regards to a lot of consultation from older persons. Older persons will recall back in 2015, 2016, that we sought their input in the development of the policy, looking at the issues that they found were impacting them, and therefore making some recommendations as to how best, from their perspective, we were to advocate for the goals to be developed and with the hope of being implemented. So in regards to the goals, as I said, there are 5 goals. And when we look at the United Nations Principles for Older Persons, they talked about these 5 principles and the issues surrounding these principles. So we took those principles to help develop our goals, and we looked at independence and autonomy of older persons, self-fulfillment for older persons, care, looking at from social care as well as health care, and there was the other goal of participation, ensuring that older persons continue to participate in areas of interest. And the 5th goal was dignity, looking at how we can continue to maintain and preserve the dignity of older persons in the Cayman Islands. We all talk about, for those of us who were born and raised before the 1960s, or in the 1960s and before that time, about how important it was for us as a society to respect our older persons, regardless of who they were or who they were in society. The mere fact that they had reached a certain age bracket automatically meant that we, the younger Caymanians, had to respect those individuals. And we found that in our consultation with the older persons going from district to district, including Cayman Brac, that was one of the key things that the older persons in those discussion groups said to us. They did not feel valued or respected in the Cayman Islands anymore. And we are hoping with the supportive action plans that will come into play in regards to supporting the implementation of the policy, that we will see a turnaround in time to address especially that particular goal of respecting the dignity of older persons.
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction, Ms. Debbie. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My 2 co-hosts with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField. In the studio with us, we have Ms. Deborah Webb-Sibley, Ms. Annie Moulton, and Ms. Linda Mitchell. And we're talking about the older persons law in the Cayman Islands that is now in effect. Please stay tuned. We're going to a commercial break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me and my co-hosts this morning, we have Ms. Deborah Webb-Sibley, Ms. Annie Moulton, and Ms. Linda Mitchell, and we are discussing the Older Persons Law 2017 that has been enacted. We're going to throw the microphone back over to Miss Deborah.
As we were saying earlier, in looking at the policy as well as the older persons law, we had to identify an age for older persons, and based on the Public Service Management Amendment Law 2016 and Personnel Amendment Regulations 2016 and the National Pension Amendment 2016 law, because the retirement age has now moved to 65, the policy therefore, as well as the older persons legislation, identifies an older person as anyone attaining the age of 65 years and older. I was talking earlier about the policy, and we have to identify that for in a policy, there must be supportive core values. And the core values for this policy speaks to our belief that older persons are vital resources who should be valued, respected, and empowered to live secure and fulfilling lives with dignity and freedom of choice. In addition, for us in the community, public, private, and civil society, to acknowledge that we all share responsibility in achieving the advancement of the well-being of older persons in the Cayman Islands. The 5 laws that I mentioned earlier, what we are hoping to achieve by having these goals. As I said earlier, goal 1 speaks to the independence and autonomy. And within this goal, we are focusing on promoting and addressing the independence and autonomy of older persons in their districts and in their communities, and ensuring that they all have access to adequate water, food, shelter, clothing, family, and community support. The second goal speaks on their integration in society, for them to participate in the formulation of all policies and legislation that impacts their well-being. The third goal that I mentioned about social care and health care, we want to see where older persons benefit from family support, care and protection, that they have access to health care, affordable and accessible health care, social and legal services to enhance their autonomy and their basic human rights. And the fourth goal, for them to pursue opportunities to achieve their full potential, and that can be continued education, spiritual and recreational activities, and having those resources within their communities available to them. And the final goal that I mentioned earlier about dignity, it is for older persons to achieve the protection, security, and dignity while addressing their financial, physical, and social needs, and looking at how to treat older persons and the different types of areas in their lives where they will need protection.
Okay. Now, in terms of those 5 goals, have we, and Miss Annie or Miss Mitchell, either you can chime in on this, have we taken stock in terms of where we were before the legislation came into place, so that you have some benchmark in terms of where we have to progress, what steps have to be taken in terms of how we achieve those goals? It's quite possible that in the run of things that some of the issues are being addressed in some manner, but maybe not in a formalized way. So have you taken stock of what we need to do in terms of achieving each of those goals?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Okay. First of all, I think it's important to speak just a little bit about the goals themselves. What is going to help propel these goals that we have set is we did task force meetings within community meetings within each district, And to what part of what that helped us to understand is what was really needed within the older elderly community, because we really didn't know everything that they needed and what their difficulties were at that particular time. So it was really, really helpful to the Older Persons Task Force Committee to get within the communities, to dig deep and to pull these people together so that they can tell us what it is that they needed and what help that they needed. And it was amazing when we found out that one of the biggest needs was the insurance, and that fell under the care goal. And what we wanted to do was to go back and to look at the initial goal that we had set for the insurance portion, and make sure that we are able to pull in at least 75 to 80% of what it was that they were needing. The cost was too expensive. The benefits were very minimum for that expensive cost. And the only way that we can make sure that we drive to the point of making sure that everything is completed is to make sure that we understood what their needs were and what they wanted.
Okay. Ms. Annie, anything
Yes.
to add?
Well, I want to agree with what Linda said, because it was only through having those meetings that we were able to find out exactly what the older persons needed and spoke to. Yes.
Okay. I think we have time for one quick observation. Dr. Steve, I don't know if you want to take yours now or later.
Well, yeah. I'm very skeptical because I have seen legislation after legislation and goals after goals. I would just like to know how are all of those goals going to be enforced or realized, and where is the resources coming from to realize them, to put to do what you have to say, to do what you said that it needs that older people need to be put in those positions, because I see younger people now who are fighting for a good education, a college education, being overrun by people from other jurisdictions who come into the country and who are better equipped to work and to engage into the economic system, and nothing is done about that. And every time they get a chance, politicians are saying, "Oh, our young people are our most precious resources, and if you're not giving funds to your precious resources, I wonder how you're going to give them to the other resources that are going the other way." So where the funds are coming from to do all this, and who is going to make sure that the funds are dispensed to these people so that they can have all of these, realize all these goals that you have set.
Okay, that is a good point for us to ponder on. When we take this commercial break, we'll be back after the news. So that will give us enough time, call over the Glass House and find out from ministers how much more money you're going to give us for this project. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after the news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing Older Persons Law 2017, which is now in effect. We have in the studio with us Ms. Deborah Webb-Sibley's, Ms. Anna Moulton, and Ms. Linda Mitchell, my two co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. They are with me as well. I want to remind you, our listening and viewing audience, our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flow, 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. You can email us at fortherecord, one word, fortherecord at candw.ky. Before I go to the question that was posed earlier in relation to funding, first of all, I want to commend the Cabinet Office and the Cabinet themselves, because finally, Cabinet Office is really doing those things that they're designed, they're developed to do, which is policy coordination. Because in this case, the policy goes across so many government ministries, so many government departments, and if they're left individually to do things, it never gets done. So the policy coordinating unit in the Cabinet Office is to be commended for undertaking such a responsibility in this particular instance. And I'll preface Dr. McField's question by saying that we look at older persons in the community as those persons who helped to build the community, helped to build the society, helped to build the infrastructure, helped to build our financial industry. We see challenges in larger jurisdictions, the big one to our north, where some of those policies and institutions that have been established to protect people when they get in their old age are now being threatened by legislation and by various administrations, things like Medicare and things of that nature that are being threatened now. So here we have an opportunity to deliver and to repay our older members of our community who helped to build this. Now let's talk about funding, Ms. Debbie.
I'm glad that you mentioned about the whole aspect of a cross-ministerial approach, because that's what has been taken in developing the policy and the supportive implementation action plans that we are still working on, as well as the council. Mm-hmm. It will take all of the identified entities, mainly in this case government ministries, because we're starting from the ministries go down, who will then decide which department within their ministries should have responsibilities for the specific areas that we will be identifying. And the costs for the implementation of those specific action plans will fall within the responsibility of the respective ministries. In other words, if we're talking about action plans to support continued education for older persons, that will fall within the Ministry of Education. And we had a meeting last week with all of the chief officers and the deputy governor to present the policy, the legislation, as well as to speak to them about some of the action plans that will impact them. And it so happened that we are now, government is now in the process of start looking at their budget for the for the 2018-2019 budget year and period beyond that. And we were able to present to each ministry some of the draft action plans that we are talking about that they will need to look at in cost in regards to how much it will cost them to implement that particular action plan. From the viewpoint of the implementation task force, we could only identify the resources will include staff, time, as well as identifying key stakeholders within the community to ensure that the particular action plan is implemented to the fullest.
Now, this funding, is it going to go beyond the administrative arm in terms of staffing and stuff, the continuation of, let's say, a program, let's say, for instance, adult continuing education? The ministry would have to budget each year for that particular output if
yes,
accepted.
That is what we are advocating for in our draft action plans, that it will be a continuous output realization in regards to what needs to be put in place to make sure the action plan continues to be implemented. The policy, the lifetime of this policy is from 2016 to 2035. And during that time, whatever changes will need to take place will take place. We have to acknowledge that we have to start from somewhere. And this is the first time in Cayman's history, to my knowledge and to the research that we were able to undertake, that there's never really been anything on a consistent level that talks about meeting the needs of older persons. And we're not just talking about their financial needs, is their overall welfare, looking at all the different aspects of one's life when you have reached that that particular age where you're considered an older person, where we have to take some responsibility as a society to make sure that we're able to provide that level of support as well as the level of encouragement. Now, the Older Persons Law was enacted last week, Monday, July 17th. And within this law, one of the reasons that the policy steering committee as well as the legal subcommittee push for the content of the law at this point, where the focus is really on the establishment of the council. Within the policy itself, we talk about the establishment of a council of older persons. Within the legal subcommittee report, we also talk about the need for a council. And this council will be a voluntary body that will be the key advocates for the implementation of the policy. And they will have the responsibility of ensuring that the relevant entities, whether it be public or private, that have been identified to be the key players in making sure that this particular action is implemented. The council will be the person or the group of, or the body, who will be there advocating, who will be there monitoring and evaluating the extent of the implementation of that action plan. Now, with the council, the legislation speaks to the functions of the council, the role of the chairperson and the deputy chair, the executive secretary, the access to services. And we just went about ensuring that the council was implemented, and we can start looking at how can we go about filling the various positions for this council.
Okay, how will the council be chosen?
What we are doing is asking for persons who are interested, who are advocates and who have been long-term advocates for older persons or the issues of older persons, to be the persons who come forward and submit their resume or their CV, identifying what it is they can bring, what they are bringing to the table for consideration. The task force, the implementation task force, we will be able to look through all of these resumes or CVs to see, looking at the best fit. Mm-hmm. We will have an established criteria list that we will look at. Then we will have to make that submission to cabinet, because the council will be approved by cabinet. The council calls for older persons, one older person representative from each district across the Cayman Islands. 2 members from the private sector, persons who are affiliated with a non-governmental advocacy group or service organization that works for the rights of older persons, and one of those persons being a medical doctor who specializes in geriatrics or who's familiar with medical issues relating to older persons, and the other will be a local attorney who is very much involved or has been involved in advocating for the rights of older persons.
Dr.
regards
Macfield, there's a role
to
for you.
legal
There's a role for you right there for you. Huh?
A representative from the Department of Children and Family Services, or the department responsible for the subject of older persons, and who will have a minimum of 5 years in geriatric social work or managing the socioeconomic aspects of older persons in the Cayman Islands. Then a representative from the ministry responsible for community affairs, a representative from the ministry responsible for health, a representative from the ministry responsible for education, employment, and gender affairs, and one executive secretary who will be appointed from within the cabinet office. And one may hear, all these other representatives from government. We need these representation from governments because it's these ministries who will be advocating
And supporting.
and supporting the council and supporting the implementation of these action plans, because the action plans that we made reference to, these ministries that we have mentioned where we need representation from, will be the key ministries who will be given the responsibility to do what needs to be done from the responsibility or from the aspect of the government to make sure that within the public sector aspect, the public sector is doing what it needs to do.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now. When we come back, we're going to ask Ms. Anna Moulton to talk about, one of the goals that she was working on during this whole process as well. So please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me and my two co-hosts this morning, we have discussing the Older Persons Law 2017, Ms. Deborah Webb Sibley, Ms. Annie Moulton, and Ms. Linda Mitchell. If you were listening earlier, they talked about 5 goals that were developed. And just as a reminder, I think someone may have inquired in terms of the age. Well, Ms. Deborah spoke about government fixing the retirement age now at 65. So that is where we take off in terms of looking at older persons at age 65, because that is usually when you retire. We still have some relics in government that have gone beyond that age, but we'll talk about that when we get to the political discussions during our show as well, how some people are able to stay on in some capacities with government, and then they say to others, oh, you have to go once you reach 65. But we're going to talk about goal number 1 that Ms. Annie Moulton was involved in. Ms. Annie.
Thank you, O.C. Well, goal 1, as I said earlier, we did a lot of research in other countries, what they were doing. And our job was to focus on addressing and promoting independence and autonomy of older persons in their districts and communities while having access to adequate food, water, shelter, clothing, family, and community support. We realized that while in some instances these were already in place by family members, but there were other areas that was lacking. And this is why personally I am so glad to be a part of this policy and in doing the work that is going to make sure that older persons, such as myself, because, if I'm lucky, I will get much older, will have all of this at their fingertips, or there's people there to provide this. Speaking to the independence and autonomy, where older persons are able, while they're still in their good senses, to make their own decisions on what they want and what should happen to them. Because we have instances here where we have family members that decide they should be the persons making the decisions for their older persons, while their older persons is still able to make their own decisions. And, personally, I don't think that is correct. I mean, some people might look at that as care and concern, but to the older person, if you're stubborn as I am, why should I let anybody make decisions for me that I'm capable of making for myself? That also goes for their independence. Being able to live in their own homes as long as they're able to, and they have that feeling of independence, that they're not put someplace where they don't see family or friends. And then, that they're provided with adequate food, water, and shelter. And they also need the family support. And I know that Dr. Steve spoke to that, about families putting their older persons away and forgetting about them. You know, I shudder to think that my family would do that to me, but it does happen. And that is where I think, a lot of people lack in that respect by thinking, oh, let somebody else do this, put them someplace else. We're busy or whatever. So they don't have that family support there. The same with water and shelter, that they have proper shelter, that their homes are not broken down, they're repaired and looked after. And I know that Dr. Steve also mentioned something, this was off break, about the Meals on Wheels. But what I'd like to say about Meals on Wheels is I think it's a very good program, and personally, I think it's needed. And the reason I say that is because I've said earlier that there's people who are left without care, without people to take care of them. And if they're home all day on their own, even though there may be food in the house, they're not able to prepare it. So I think the program of Meals on Wheels, Dr. Steve, plays a very important function in the island, and it's something that I have supported and will continue to support. As an older person myself, as I said to Debbie, don't use me as an example of an older person, but I am an older person. I will soon be 81 years old. It was a big eye-opener to me to being part of this task force, and especially, and I might be digressing a little bit, but I think I need to get that out there, in doing the research to see what other countries have done and is doing regards to their older persons. They have made recommendations to their governments and the powers that be that really put in place policies and programs that take care of their older people. I think that Cayman has waited a long, long time to put something like this in place. We are behind, actually, in a lot of countries. And in doing our research, one of the places that we researched their policies and program was Belize. And Belize is a very small country, I guess, compared to us. I don't know what the population in Belize is or what, But they have policies in place and have had policies in place for their older persons that we should have had in place for our people as well. As Steve talks about, being the fifth largest financial center in the world, and we're still lacking on how we prepare and treat our older persons. I think it's high time that we did what we're doing, and I'm trusting and hoping that all of our hard work is not going to go for naught. And I have confidence, Dr. Steve, that with the council being responsible for implementation of these policies and action plans, that we will get what we are asking for, and that the older persons in this island will be taken care of and find themselves in a much better place in the future than we are right now.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ms. Annie. Ms. Mitchell, we're going to ask you, I think you, goal number 3 was the one that you addressed. We have about 3 or 4 minutes before we go to a break, so if we have to interrupt during that break, then we'll continue when we return from the break as well.
No problem. Thank you so much. And by the way, thank you for having us to come and represent this most important aim for the country.
Being here. Thanks.
Goal 3, our aim here was to advocate for older persons to benefit from family and community care and protection, to have access to health care, and not only health care, but affordable health care, social and legal services to enhance their autonomy and their basic human rights, while residing in any emergency shelter, care, or treatment facility, as well as their private homes. This was a really tough goal. Anytime you have to come up against funding for major items such as insurance and care, it can get quite intense and it can get quite expensive. From having conducted the district meetings, one of the major issues that came out of those meetings were although the majority of the persons do have insurance, the insurance was not significant because as we age and get older, then our health sort of deteriorates a little bit. Everyone is perhaps not like Miss Annie.
I'm
getting younger every day.
Right. So there is an increase in the need for the insurance, and the amount that the older persons within the districts pay is just not adequate to sustain their finances. What we look at, although there's no any form of taxation for retirement for older persons other than the pensions, which is part of the law. Most older persons will undoubtedly outlive their resources, right? Their financial resources. So here again, the care became very significant to us because you not only have expenses for insurance, you also have expenses to care for them once they reach the age to where they cannot care for themselves. And having in-home care for these persons is also can get quite expensive as well. So we looked at there were so many the actions, the strategic aim behind Goal 3 was enormous. I mean, there were strategy after strategy after strategy, which was what was required in order to make sure that the older persons will benefit from the care that they need during their elderly years.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to take a commercial break now. When we come back, Dr. McField, I'm curious to know how can organizations, let's say like the Seafarers Association, who have some things established for their members, how they can get involved in either in the council or in expanding the program that they have, or in government and looking at the program, some of the programs that they have, and helping to implement those as well. So please stay tuned. Lots to discuss. This is of importance to everyone because if you're not old like us now, you will get there sometime if you're lucky. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My two co-hosts with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField in the studio with us discussing the Older Persons Law 2017, Ms. Deborah Webb-Sibbles, Ms. Anna Moulton, and Ms. Linda Mitchell. Before we took the break, we talked about, or I said that we wanted to talk about organizations like the Seafarers Union, Seafarers Association, being able to in some way contribute to this whole process in one form of the other. And I think Ms. Debbie wanted to address that.
Well, one of the things that we're hoping to achieve is that representatives from the Seafarers or even the Veterans Association will be persons who will come forward to advocate to be a part of the council. In due course, we will also like to advocate for the development of an association for older persons where the fundamentals of that association would be similar to the Seafarers or even the veterans, mainly the Seafarers, where they can advocate, do fundraising, and promote issues relating to the older person in a way that the council may not be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if I am a older person sitting at home listening to this broadcast live, or if I'm watching it on government TV over the next few days, what is it that I can expect as an older person moving forward? What am I likely to see first, and how quickly would I be able to realize some of the benefits of this legislation?
Well, in realizing some of the benefits, it may take a year or two. We have identified some of the action plans that can be implemented for the remainder of this budget year. But most of the action plans that we're advocating for will commence in the budget year of 2018. But we want to stress for those who are listening and contemplating, should I send in my resume or my CV to be considered to be a member of this council. We want persons to really think hard about that and come forward and step out and say, look, I can make a difference. I have something to bring to the table. The council will be meeting a minimum of 12 months per year, once per month. And for persons who are interested, I need to put this out there. They can forward their resume or CV to my attention. And we have extended the date for submission to Friday, August 4th. And they can send it to Deborah Webb Sibley's, Cabinet Office, Government Admin Building, P.O. Box number 105, 133 Elgin Avenue, Grand Cayman, KY1 9000. And that is if they're going to mail it in. Or if they're going to hand deliver it, they can deliver it to the Government Admin Building to my attention.
Can they send it electronically as well?
Yes, they can. And my email address is Deborah, that's DEBORAH .webb, WEBB hyphen SIBBLIES @gov.ky.
Okay. Now, Ms. Teresa, we want to get you into this conversation. We know that you have a long time before you're going to reach, that golden age, that beautiful age. But and any question that you may want to pose at this time again?
You're too much, OC. But, as we were speaking during the break, first of all, huge commendation for this effort. I know a lot of hours and hard work must have been undertaken to get this to where we are. And I listened to Debbie speak of the role that the former minister played in ensuring that this actually reached the level that it has. For me, I'm always the pragmatist. And I hope what I am about to say will be taken in the spirit in which it's shared. Money, 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 money. And we, as we heard Dr. McField speak during one of the breaks about the role of children in our community. And we always say that they're our best gifts, and we must embrace them and do what is right for them. And we have seen historically that the kind of attention that is needed for that, especially their education, has been woefully flawed. And a lot of money has been spent on education from different different administrations. I guess my challenge is this, and I hear, Debbie, when you say that different ministries will have different responsibilities, the increase in the workload that's going to be undertaken by the various ministries, the cost to bring about these things if government is going to play a significant role, and then inviting the private sector or volunteer organizations to raise funds. I know what it takes for me personally to raise money for sports and different things. And there's only a small pie to go around. And how efficient is anybody, and I mean body as in corporate body, going to be in ensuring that a piece of that pie is earmarked for old people and their needs? That's a major concern that I have. And if you're going to, as you rightly say, anyone who's going to volunteer for this must have a deep desire and real commitment to making this a reality. So though, and I'm not saying this to suggest that it's not possible. And I hear you when you say that a lot of these things won't be possible for 2 more years. And I'm thinking, if I'm an old person living at home with these needs that has been expressed in the policy paper, what do I do in the interim? You know, I know this is aspirational, and I know that at least now we're having a sensible conversation about the issue. But for me, it's all about the practical reality and pragmatism. How will we really, really make it work at the end of the day? And I hear the policies, which is great, because that's what governments are supposed to do, deliver the policy, supposed to be implemented by the various civil service association. But we're complaining about money all the time, and I'm wanting to see where we're going to get it.
And I'd just like to add a question to that also as well. That was pointed out by maybe one of our callers offline. Are there any low-hanging fruits now that we can grab onto right away? Yes.
And can I also use the small thing about rent control? Because I was speaking to
let
that.
Let her answer that one first, and then we'll get to that after.
Okay, thanks.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the costing for the implementing of any of the draft action plans that we haven't gone into much detail about, and we will once these plans have been completed and approved by Cabinet, we will be able to talk more specifically about what these action plans are. What the task force has been doing is identifying the short, the medium, and the long term actions that can be implemented. There are some that we can move forward with now, and that key one that we can move forward with now is the establishment of the council. Within the 2018-2019 budget, we have identified some of the action plans that can be implemented within that budget period. We have moved beyond that, where some will be implemented in 2020, depending on what those particular action plans will call for. But the key thing at this point for us as members of the task force is to get the council up and running, and operational. And then from there, we can start talking about the action plans that will be implemented, what they are, and the time frame that we are recommending their implementation, and who will be the leading entity to ensure those implementation action plans are implemented.
Okay.
And they're prioritized as well?
Yes.
Okay. We have 2 callers. We can accommodate 1 caller, I believe, before we take the break. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning to your host and to your panel.
Good morning,
morning.
ma'am.
Good morning.
This is Georgia D. Banks, and I have been listening intently to all that has been said, and I commend all of those who seem to fully realize that there are old people living on this island, believe it or not. And I am one of those old ladies. If God wills it, I will be 90 in September. But
Beautiful.
I am so kind of sorry to hear that some of these plans may not be implemented until a year or two. And with people in their 80s and some in their 90s like me, if God is kind to us, we hope we live to see it implemented. And the final thing I want to say, the person who will be on those councils, if they do not have heart, it will not work. It will not work, because if you are a person who really doesn't care about other people, it just won't work. So may all the people on the council be people with kind, loving hearts. Thank you so much, Mr. O.C., and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Georgette, for that. We know
Yes.
you were one of the persons that I was, tongue-in-cheek referring to in terms of listening, because we know that she's always there, and this is something that would certainly pique Ms. Georgette's interest as well. We have one more caller. We're going to go to headline news first. When we return, we will take that caller. So, caller, please hang in there. Headline news is just probably about a minute, and we will be back. So please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing the older persons law passed this year. We have in the studio with us Ms. Deborah Webb Sibley, Ms. Anna Moulton, and Ms. Linda Mitchell, my two co-hosts, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, and we have one caller online that we promised that we would go to immediately after the headline news. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. Just thinking how to phrase it, Mr. All right. Good morning to everybody there. I'm not going to call the name to everybody to save time. But good morning.
Good morning, sir.
To your program, and it's very necessary what you're talking about. The only thing that I can really say as regards to the pension law, and this is talking about money, the only difference between an old man and an elderly gentleman is money. One word. For elder people to be respected, and I'll reach that one day, right? I'm not there yet. Not even near there. That for elder people to be respected.
We're all in denial. I'm kidding.
They have, if they have money, when you arrive at the Ritz-Carlton, they'll open the door. But the man sitting at the supermarket entrance, people try to find a way to avoid him. And we started to do a pension plan in these islands with the stated goals and the right intentions. But we have lost from 1999 until today, nearly 20 years, as a direct result of poor regulation and poor management of the pension regime. Mm-hmm. We have never had, and I'm hoping that we will have, sooner rather than later, a political pension champion. We have never had one. It has never been properly regulated. Mm-hmm. Millions of dollars have been lost because of poor regulation.
How does that tie into this legislation that we're talking about, caller?
Pardon?
How does that tie into this legislation that we're talking about?
Totally.
Well, tie it for us.
Totally. The welfare of elderly people, they need to have proper income to maintain their dignity without having to go through the questions that they go through, the intimidating questions when they go to the needs assessment unit. Mm-hmm. It kills their will. It kills their pride. It kills their belief in themselves. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It is embarrassing. I've seen it. And yet still, the pension regime that we have in government works for the financial industry and not for the people of the Cayman Islands.
Okay. How do we ensure that this older person's legislation doesn't end up like the pension scheme?
How do we ensure? It means that we need a populace that understands that they have to be assertive. Or people, if you stick your head above the parapet here, they tend to want to cut it off. You're called names, you're ostracized, unless you agree and you give platitudes to those that rule us. And when you try to go to government to get information about pensions, because all risk in the pension regime, the investment risk, the adequacy risk, the crookery of people in there is on the poor employee. When he asks information to try and find out what's going on in the pension plans do not want to release information. They have put a few more things in the current legislation that they just did, but it is nowhere adequate, because all pension plan operational information must be made available to all pension plan members.
Okay, caller, thank you very much for that. That's going to tie in right now very neatly with my other observation, something that was discussed off the air. Dr. Steve McFeel, we have heard calls for advocacy. We will have a council, but Dr. McFeel also raised off air the whole issue of possibly having an ombudsman.
That's right.
To act in some capacity to ensure that this legislation is effective. Dr. McFeel.
Yeah, I don't see it working without an ombudsman for the older people, to make sure that it works and make sure that their rights are protected, and to make sure that government does what it say it's going to do. Mm-hmm. Because as soon as different ministers or different government can use it as a political ploy. Well, look what we did, look what we put in place. Well, sure, that's their job, that's what we hired them for, that's what they got elected for. What we need is someone who is going to enforce the rights of the older persons, to make sure that the law protects them, and the law is not used just as a stool or whipping boy for something else. And it seems to me that it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Where in Vancouver they have something called the Vancouver Council of Christians and Jews. And they have similar programs. They have a program for young people. I used to take my kids there every summer, or in the evenings from school, or in the mornings if I want to leave them there. And they had the whole day. They had everything that you could think about that children could do. And the same thing with older people. They bus them to these centers. They have music. They have dancing. They have lessons. They have food. They have lunch. They have everything. And it is taking care of your people when they get older. It's enriching their lives until when they decease. I see that as something that we need to do in the Cayman Islands. The Seafarers Association were the similar thing. They discarded us and said, "Oh, those old seamen, they all drunk people. They haven't done anything for Cayman Islands." And we got together, we formed our association, and we got organized, and we built our hall. And we have recreation. We have our socials where we go out and dance, and every 3 months, and we have something. We raise money. We have over $1 million in the bank that we rent out and raise funds for ourselves. We can donate to all the charities. We donate. We gave a machine to the hospital. It cost over $100 million. And all these things that we able to do for ourselves. And every time I go to a social or something at the Seaman Hall, I can see the dignity, the pride in the seamen's eyes, that they have a place that they can go to and have comradeship with each other and talk about the old days and the good old times, and when they went to sea and the storms and all the things that they went through. I see the same thing for older people. I got to congratulate the minister for this vision that he had. It's a pity that he was not able to finish it, but that is politics. I would want to get involved, but I would not get involved until I see that it is going to be funded properly. And I cannot see any funding unless there's an assessment in our society. There has to be an assessment somewhere to pay for this.
Now, normally when we look at legislation, because of our new constitution and because of the fact that we have a Bill of Rights in our constitution, we always want to ensure that legislation that is being put forward, that is being passed, is compatible with our constitution. We made the observation very early off mic about the fact that our constitution speaks more to all persons and doesn't necessarily pinpoint elderly persons. We have a constitution that protects our environment, one of the few constitutions in the world, other than I think it's the South African constitution, that has a specific clause in there that protects the environment. We have that in our Constitution, but what is missing from it is any protection of our elderly. We're put into that broad category of all. Now, some may say you don't want to cherry pick and identify one, but we recognize children as being
Yes.
the most
Yes.
vulnerable in
Yes.
our society. The next most vulnerable has to be
the
elderly
elderly
persons. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, the only place in a constitution where it talks about anything about age is in section 16, the discriminatory section.
Yes.
And it says you cannot discriminate against people because of their age, but it doesn't protect any elderly people. Elderly people are sort of left out because that has been the trend. You know, when they did the constitution in 2009, I don't think they had elderly people on their minds. They certainly were talking about children because the politicians always say, and I repeat again, oh, we're cheering our most precious resources. That's what they say to get the vote. But I don't see them doing anything much for the children. And so if they don't protect children, how do you think they're going to protect the elderly? Those people who they think, well, they're not going to be here long with us very long, and their needs are not going to be that valuable. You see, we only think about things. We are a very physical society. We only think about things in terms of money. If you like, and like the caller said, if you have lots of money, you can open the doors and you can go to all the things at Ritz-Carlton. But if you're poor and you're sitting by Pearlie's and asking for a handout, they're going to pass you by. And so I don't want to see this as another lame duck, another policy that comes and after a while it's gone. It's a great policy. I do want to support it, but I want to know how are we going to assess the funds to be able to implement this the right way.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Steve. We're going to take a little bit earlier commercial break than usual, Miss Susan, because when we return, I want to give these three young ladies who are sitting in front of me, Miss Debbie, Miss Linda, and Miss Annie, an opportunity the last 15 minutes to really talk again about the legislation and ensure that they get across all of the points and ideas that they want our listening and viewing audience to be exposed to. So please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're on the final leg of the show this morning, and it has been our pleasure. It has been a pleasure for me and my co-hosts, Miss Theresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Markfield, to have in the studio with us discussing the Older Persons Law 2017, Miss Deborah Webb Sibley's, Miss Anna Moulton, and Miss Linda Mitchell, and we're giving them the mic for the last leg of the show, starting with Miss Debbie.
We have to change the mindset of how we view older persons within our communities, within our homes, within our schools, all aspects of the Caymanian life. We need to take into consideration what changes need to be made to ensure that not just supporting and uplifting the policy and the legislation, but looking at our values, looking at our culture. And older persons play a key role in our values and in our culture and in our history. So it's giving life to what we keep advocating and saying needs to be put in place. So it's looking at our attitudes. How do we respond to older persons? When we as young people encounter older persons in challenging situations, how are we going to respond? How are we going to deal with it? I know I heard someone when we were doing our consultation in the district say, but it's going to be challenging to change the mindset to a certain extent because there are some older persons when they were younger were not nice to children. So how are we going to expect us now that they're older to, give them this level of respect? But it goes back to respecting everyone. We all deserve to be respected. Mm-hmm. And regardless of who we are or where we come from in our society, we all deserve that level of respect. So one of the key roles that the council of older persons will have to do is advocating for that mindset, that change in mindset, that change in attitudes. I know back in 2015, that was 2016, we did a little survey looking at the attitudes towards older persons, and some of the responses came back that there's no negative attitudes being displayed towards older person in Cayman. But based on our discussions and our visits with older persons in the districts, we found that they themselves don't feel valued. They don't feel that their needs are being given priority, or that in some cases people value the fact that they're still here. I know we may not want to hear that, but if that's how someone is feeling, we have to respect it, and we have to do whatever we can to uplift that individual or the group of individuals who feel that they've reached a certain age. So why continue to live? Why give up? Not just why give up, but to actually give up and not want to advocate for themselves anymore. I know in Cayman we are considered to be very friendly, sweet, loving people. We don't really get up and advocate for our rights or our welfare. But what we are advocating for in regards to the formulation and the establishment of this Council of Older Persons is for older persons to feel that they have an opportunity, they have a voice. They need to be considered as members of the society, not as a burden in any aspects, but as active members who have a right to be heard, who have a right to be treated with a level of respect to uphold their dignity. So that's why with the 5 goals that we have identified in the policy, where we advocate for all aspects, because the vision of this policy is to advance the well-being of older persons, and that is looking at it from a holistic perspective, not tunnel vision.
Ms. Mitchell?
Okay, thank you. When we decided, when we got started with this policy, with this whole outlay over a year ago, one of the things that we did not want is to spend all of this time, all of these hours developing a policy and then let it be shelved, right? So we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So this is where the council is going to come into place to take over once we have this policy out. One of their main responsibilities will be to continue to coordinate with government entities as well as other service providers and the older persons so that we can make sure that all of these issues and the strategies that's within this policy, that they are put out front and that they will continue to be there so that we can make sure that the goals that were established, that the strategies and the aims are going to be in full force going forward. And we don't want to we want to make sure that it just doesn't become something that nobody else pays any attention to. So the council is going to be the key to making sure that it continues to move forward.
Ms. Annie?
Before Ms. Annie speaks,
Sure.
just to add, the council members will be appointed by cabinet.
And what's the deadline again for receiving?
They need to get
August
their
4th.
submission to me by Friday, August 4th.
Okay.
And they will be appointed for 4 years, a 4-year term, with the possibility of being renewed for another 4 years. And from our perspective and our standpoint, as Ms. Linda said, the role and the position that we have taken as representatives of the cabinet, because we have been approved by cabinet to do what we're doing, is to make sure that there is life into what it is we're doing. Yes, I know, and I acknowledge and respect the fact that persons may be skeptical at this point because it's like, another ring around the roses. But that is not the position that we take. So whatever steps that needs to be done, once we have the support and the permission of the cabinet to move forward, we will do so. There's a policy, there's now the older persons legislation, and even though this legislation right now just speaks to the establishment of the council, based on the legal subcommittee report that we were charged in developing, there are a lot of other laws that we have advocated for that needs to be amended to ensure that it supports the policy as well as older persons legislation. So what is here in the current legislation for the older person, this is not the end. This is just the beginning, getting our foot in the door to get the council established, because that council will be the body who will be advocating for all the regulations, all the amendments to existing laws to be undertaken. So that will be some of their roles in regards to what will be expected of them. So I don't say this to intimidate people who may want to be a part of the council. But one of the key things is to come with that open mindset and that commitment and that drive to make a difference.
Okay. We have two callers and we're going to try to accommodate those. So, Ms. Anna, we're going to come to you last. You're going to probably end up having the last word. Anyway, we're going to ask the two callers to be as brief as possible because we have probably about 5 minutes left, but we want to hear from you. So, first caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning. I wasn't sure if it was me or not. Good morning to you, OC, and good morning to your panel. I think it's Debbie there,
Yes,
Miss
thank
Mitchell, and my cousin there, Miss Annie.
Yes, okay.
Yes. I must tell you, I only just caught the tail end of your conversation this morning and felt very moved. I don't know why, as Debbie started to speak in the closing there, where she talked about a shift in mindset and speaking to a shift in culture, it really just hit home. I don't know if it was because I read an article this morning that I think it was the state of Florida is dealing with some major issue in terms of some very young people. I think it was 12 to 16 years old, who basically ignored a man who was drowning, and it hit me to the core this morning. And he was a disabled person. And then I think about what she was just sharing, and it really just shook me. There are some societies that the elder person is held up in great esteem for their wisdom, for what they bring to the table, for their journey. They help to connect the past with what we're dealing with now, and just respect for their contributions. Period. And it really saddens me that we have to come to a council in order to regulate on their behalf, although I fully understand it. And I just give Debbie and her team my full support, man. My heart is full, to be honest with you, just thinking that we even have to do that. I just want to thank all the older people that may be listening out there, or seniors or other. And you know what? One more thing before I go, OC. We need to think about, as a community, not just a community of people, but also from a government standpoint. You know, what are we doing to encourage and to promote the older people? You know, many of us go to Florida and we'll see older people still working at jobs, not pretty much because perhaps they need to, but because those companies demand them and put them into things like you know, bagging or whatever. It's just a respect all around. And anyway, I just wanted to share my thoughts, man.
Thank you.
And thank you all.
Thank you very much, caller. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Woods.
Good morning, sir.
Wonderful co-host there. And my way of funding, we know, will finally come into place. And this is one of the catalysts that will push that into place. You know, one of the two words that we all fear and which are inevitable: income tax, direct income tax, and direct independence. But it was wonderful ladies there. I won't talk about everything that they're talking about, and I know it's just wonderful to hear what they have in mind. But I just wonder, what about the mentioned health insurance and all that? We know that older people cannot possibly pay the health insurance premiums and still have to turn around paying 10-20%, and they just can't afford it. So I'm wondering about what pushing towards free health care. They might not want money like from the social services. They might be able to provide for their other things, but the health care, which is the number one cost, if they're going to look at that, free health care for all the people 65 and older. I don't see why we can't put that in place. But of course, we know we'll have to.
It's a fundamental human right. Thank you very much for that, caller. Ms. Annie.
Yes, thank you, OC. Listening to Debbie and my good friend here, Linda, there is very little that I can add to what they have already said. I reiterate everything that they have said. But what I'd like to speak to is something, again, Dr. Steve, that you mentioned about funding. I agree. It's always money, money, money. And if we all recall, many years ago, during the term of the late Jim Budden, he wanted to put in place development fee, levy, or whatever you wanted to call it. In my estimation, in my opinion, I think that something like that should be thought about and put in place, whereby we can get funds to fund this policy, because without money, I see it is not, practical.
Right, yeah.
Instead of us giving these developers concessions, we should be putting a levy on them and use that money specifically for this policy. With regards to, and this is something that the last caller just spoke about, how we see older people in the community. Or by not saying you're too old to do this or you're too old to do that. We can use older persons in many different ways. As you all know, my background is tourism. I think we could use a lot of these older persons as ambassadors, for our islands. Put them to work, make them feel good about themselves, giving them, their dignity and their independence. And there's lots of other ways that we can use older people who are willing, able, and have the desire to still contribute. Because as older persons in this country, we try to make our contributions as best we can. And we should be, listened to. Maybe sometime we go off too much and rattle too much, and you can ignore that. But when it's a sensible conversation and it all ties in with what we're trying to do, then use us.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here in the studio this morning. I want to wish you every success moving forward. I want to point out again that the council is going to need not only committed persons, but persons who have a buy-in into the system, persons who can forcefully advocate, Dr. Steve McPhee, who can forcefully advocate, and even though the funds may not be there now, to ensure that they're there. Someone who will hold the government and any other body to account to ensure that this takes place. We don't need weak members on that council. You need strong members on that council if we want to get this thing off the ground. I'm not sure where the statistics are in relation to our society, whether or not we're becoming an older society, what our birth rate is, whether it's up or it's down. If our birth rate is down, then we're going to have older, a much older society. And if we don't address this now, we're going to have to address it later on, and later on may be a little bit too late. Ms. T, you want to get a word in?
That's exactly what I was going to say. But I would also like to end on a really, really positive note. I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Intern. Has anyone seen Robert De Niro in The Intern?
Yes,
I would hugely recommend that to all of these folks that are thinking about how beneficial it is to have somebody who's older. I mean, we have Dr. McField here, who's a clear working example, and obviously Miss Annie. But look at that show, The Intern. I mean, he came in, he was 70 years old, and he came in and literally assist a young lady who was running I think it was a IT organization or selling clothes online or something. I can't remember what it was, but she was like 40 years his junior, and he assisted her in making that organization tremendous.
Yeah, and there's always life after, in terms of being, you can become a talk show host, right, Dr. So, folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension, for the record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Mr. Gilbert McLean at 12 noon for Talk Today, where he will continue to fill in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. Have a great day, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.